I pray that I might speak to you this morning in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. So I don't think that we should be too hard on Peter for how he reacts, for the way he reacted in that gospel reading we just heard. I don't think we should be too hard on Peter for wanting to hold on to or wanting to cling to that mountaintop experience of finding himself completely surrounded by the glory of God. Poor Peter. He always seems to get portrayed as this bumbling fool who always manages to say the wrong thing. And apparently, he's done it again in today's gospel when he says, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. Let me build 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." It appears that that's not the right thing to say. But why is that so ridiculous? Who wouldn't want to be able to hold on to that kind of an experience for as long as possible? Who would not want to hold on to a mountaintop moment? We've all had them. We've all had mountaintop experiences in our lives. Moments when we find ourselves standing in complete and utter awe because of the grace of God that has been poured out on us. Now, we might not always articulate it using those words, but we've all had those kinds of experiences in our lives. Moments when we are absolutely sure that God's love has acted in our lives. Moments when our faith is confirmed. And I'd be willing to bet, I would be willing to bet that you can think of a time in your life, something that you have experienced, where you have thought to yourself, I wish I could stay right here in this moment forever. My favorite part of a wedding, it happens after the vows have been exchanged, after the rings have been given, after the nuptial blessing has been pronounced. My favorite part happens when the bride and the groom, they turn around to face the congregation in order to be introduced as husband and wife for the first time. Here you have 2 people who came into that moment as single adults and are now one, united in love by the grace of God. And when they turn around to face the congregation, just like Moses' face in that Old Testament reading that we heard, just like Jesus' face in that gospel reading, in that moment when they turn around, they shine. They are utterly beaming with the glory of God. They are on the top of the mountain. Parents who hold their newborn child in their arms for the first time, they too, they can relate to what Peter, James, and John experienced on that mountaintop. Looking down at that little miracle for the first time, parents experience the fullness of God's love, God's infinite grace. And in that moment, their faces shine with the glory of God. They are on the mountaintop. Who wouldn't want to hold on to these kinds of experiences, these kinds of moments for as long as possible? Who wouldn't want to? And so I'm with Peter on this one. Lord, it's so good for us to be here. But here's the thing, and I've said this to you before. Here's the thing about mountaintops. Sure, there's a great view when you find yourself standing on the top of a mountain. But if you look around you, right in your midst while you're on that mountain, not a whole lot grows on the top of a mountain. If you look at the Rocky Mountains or Mount Everest, the air is too thin. The temperature is too cold for much of anything to grow up In other words, this life is not meant to be lived on the top of a mountain. Just watch the movie Everest, and you will see that this is true. Our life is not meant to be lived on the top of a mountain. All married couples eventually come to the same conclusion that the honeymoon had to end sometime. Eventually they have no choice but to come back down that mountain from that moment of transfiguration and return to the reality of everyday life, where underwear and socks get left on the floor and dirty dishes pile up in the sink, and maybe, just maybe, they find themselves nattering about who's going to do all that housework. All new parents realize in a hurry that they have no choice but to come back down the mountain from that moment of transfiguration and return to the reality of everyday life, where there's sleepless nights, dirty diapers, midnight feedings, babies who cry for hours on end. That becomes the order of the day. We might want to hold on to those mountaintop moments for as long as possible, but the majority of life is not lived up there. It is lived down in the valley. And I think what people are longing for, I think that people are longing to know that God is with them. That God is with them not just in those occasional top of the mountain moments that we've all had. But I think we are all longing to know that our God is with us in the midst of our ordinary, everyday lives. Lives that can sometimes be a real struggle. Lives that sometimes present us with hardship. Lives that sometimes have us coming up against sorrow and grief and death. That is what is at the heart of this gospel story this morning. That is what is at the heart of the entire Christian faith, for that matter. That Jesus came back down the mountain. If you have ever seen Raphael's painting of the Transfiguration, it doesn't just focus on what is happening on the top of the mountain. He also paints a picture of the life that is being lived and experienced by the people down in the valley below. He paints an absolutely chaotic scene at the bottom of the canvas. Just like in the second part of our gospel reading for today. In the painting, there is a boy who is deathly sick. And the disciples who remained at the bottom of the mountain, they have been unable to cure this boy. They have tried everything, but they cannot seem to bring healing to this boy's life. In the painting, the fear and the frustration is palpable. There is this look of pain, this look of despair on many of the faces. And yet, from the midst of the crowd, there are two figures in Raphael's painting. There are two figures that point us in the direction of the top of the mountain. There are two figures that point us to the sky. Those two figures, they direct our eyes to the transfigured Jesus who is standing on top of the mountain. They point us to his shining face. From within the fear and desperation of the people who are living down in the valley, those two hands, they point us to the glory of God. They point us to the glory of God that is being revealed on that mountaintop. And the reason why they point us and they want us to fix our eyes on that glory is because that glory is about to come down the mountain in the person of Jesus. That glory is about to come back down the mountain and will bring healing and life not just to that one boy, but to the whole world. Jesus came back down. down to where the rest of the disciples are, down to where we are, down to the challenges and the struggles of this life. This is not a minor detail in this story. This is the very heart of our Christian faith. That Jesus came down that mountain to dwell among us in the valley of our everyday lives. That is something that we confess every single time we say the Nicene Creed together. It is so central to our faith that we confess it regularly. We say that we believe in Jesus Christ because for us, for our salvation, he came down from heaven. God's glory, embodied in the person of Jesus, came down to be with us, to be for us, to take on our life, so that we might not simply persevere in this life, but we might actually flourish. That we might not simply struggle to have life, but we might have it abundantly. That we might, in Jesus coming back down that mountain, that we might come to understand that this God who created and sustains the entire universe not only knows that we exist, but loves us. Loves each and every single one of us to come to us, to care about our ups and downs, to care about our hopes and our disappointments, to care about our dreams and our despairs, to care about all the things that we care about, promising to be with us, to walk alongside us, to never, ever let us go, and in time to redeem us and to bring us into the kingdom of heaven with the company of saints. And we are able to know and experience this not just in the mountaintop moments of our lives. We are able to know and experience this incredible grace, all because Jesus comes back down the mountain in order to be with us where we live. Amen.